know what that is. I know what that
Oh my goodness.
is. Oh, somebody made that.
Yep.
Twice. Yeah, so
This is the sort of thing that makes certain jobs thankless.
you're taking the line of fire.
Yeah. You can move back if you like.
Out of the.
So,
Good, good.
so
You're at the little
I
desk.
just have to say I'm going to call this meeting to order, and then mention the executive session. Or can I do call to order, pledge of allegiance, and mention the executive session?
No, just kind of.
Okay.
Just mention that we call me to order board meeting, and then just wait to.
Perfect.
Yeah, so just kind of use that for your.
All right.
So this Vanessa will take notes.
Okay, perfect.
Share of it. Yeah, share of it. I was trying to remember the young lady who served on the board as a member prior to Cameron was Sheridan. She's now assumed a different role, and she will be coming back to us on a regular basis. Yeah. I think she's our student body president.
Hey, Bill, sit down.
Sheridan Hesse.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The board met at executive session at 6:30 to discuss a personnel matter. In President Bob Presley's absence, I am his stunt double for today. So I'd like to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Echoing, Todd.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Giving our back.
Is that too close? All right. Again, a couple announcements. We did meet in executive session and discussed a personnel matter. We will be having a second executive session at the end of this meeting. Now let's start with adopting of the agenda. Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Bill, second. Mary, all in favor? All right. Okay. Now we'll move on to the Board of Education member comments.
Same thing about me.
Oh, and actually, let me make a comment. I'd like everybody to see we've got Ms. Naomi Hoffman here. She is our newly elected board member, and so she gets to sit up here with us until she's officially sworn in July. So welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Stevenson.
Thanks. So congratulations, Naomi. So happy that you're joining us. In the respect of time tonight, I just want to announce that, again, Green and White Gala is Friday. And we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a great night. If you haven't signed up, you would like to go, we can still get a ticket. So just go on SafePay and do that. And hope to see you there. Thanks.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of participating in the high school's freshman Give Back Day a couple of weeks ago, where students and staff and faculty have the opportunity to do different service around the high school, around High School West. It was just a pleasure to see so many students because it's voluntary to take the time to participate. It's a great time for board members and volunteers and staff just to really give back. And again, it was a wonderful turnout. They've been doing this for many years now, so glad to be a part of that. Yesterday, on another note, yesterday morning on Channel 10, they had a story about concern of mental health for students, and they actually interviewed the principal at Waterford Half Moon High School. And they also talked about how New York State School Board Association did a recent summit on mental health in the capital region, and how many different communities and regions throughout New York State have been requesting to participate in a similar summit. But it made me proud as a Shen board member, as a Shen parent, to know how progressive our district has been. And over the past couple of years, especially with the Wellness Center, but the mental health services that we provide to our students, and that we've invested in that, understanding the pressures that our children are under nowadays. So I just very pleased to see that we were ahead of that curve, and was quite surprised. I was like ready to call them, go call Shen, interview them to see what can be done at school districts to support their kids. But it also reminds us at this time of year, the pressures that our students are under with finals, wrapping up the school year. So just being sensitive to that as parents and staff and faculty, just to be aware, to keep in mind, and if we see kids struggling, just to be a support to them. Just again, it's that time of year. And talking about this time of year, a thing I was also impressed by was dropping off two of my high school students the other day, and in the front circle of the school, I'm like, what is going on? I see these inner tube blow-ups, that go in the pool with that look like donuts, and I'm like, oh boy. And my kids were like, really, what is going on now? It was pleasant to see, though, the students had signs that were saying, finish the year strong. So here are students encouraging other students, finish the year strong. It was nice to see them encouraging each other, and they were giving away donuts, so hence the donut floats that they were wearing. But again, good to see the students really cheering on each other to have a good finish to the year. This Sunday, June 11th, just for people that have participated, the Deanna Rivers 518 Memorial Softball Tournament is at the Commons. It's a $3 donation, and all the money that they raise will support local charities, especially for charities of youth, but that in Deanna's memory and in the spirit of her compassion and her kind heart. So just want to remind people, if you can get out, sounds like Sunday will be a nice day, so enjoy the nice weather too. That's it for me.
Thank you. I have a couple things I want to mention. One, and people on the board, maybe Gary remembers back, but one of our former board members passed away this week, Peter Fort. Peter was, and my memory, is the longest-term board member to serve at Shenendehowa. He had 20 years on the Shen board. He was 77 years old, passed away this week. So just remember Peter and his family. We know from sitting on this side of the table that there is a great sacrifice on the part of the families. we sometimes can get hooked up and buried in our own, all the time that we're spending, but we're taking it away from something. And Peter's wife, Sandy, was one of those people who was quietly in the background as Peter served as president of this board during some tumultuous times. He was in on the 70s through the 90s. So just to mention that, if people didn't know it. The other thing I want to mention, Peter and I were on the school board with a person who was most interesting, not to take anything away from any of these board members, the most interesting board member I ever sat with, Dr. Roger Wright. He was a professor of meteorology at metallurgy at RPI. And Roger could put things in terms that you couldn't understand half of what he said, but some of what he said made so much sense. And he used to say, it was in the days when people would, in the comments, they would give their comments, and we would comment back. It wasn't a pretty sight over time, especially on controversial issues. And he had a quote that I will never forget, and it was, after one particularly difficult night where we were doing budget things, it was in very difficult budget times, and he said, the trouble sometimes is that people jump to conclusions. They never give us the benefit of the doubt. They only give us the doubt. And I say that not to the audience, but to me and to everyone else, that it's so easy these days. I mean, Shen's been in the news. Anything Shen does is going to be in the news. So that's a given when we're here. But I, at times, will look at things, and I'll jump to a conclusion. And my wife reminds me, we just finished an 8-week course that we facilitated on emotionally healthy relationships. And one of the things that they caution you against is mind reading. And I think sometimes it relates to Roger's quote. Sometimes you just assume, you make your assumptions and you go forward and, damn it, we're going to change that. And you don't know all the facts. And I do it, and I suspect other people do it as well. And this latest couple weeks of communication kind of things where the spotlight and people run up here to look at Shen, what we're doing, there is thought behind what we're doing. The issue of the prayer room is a thoughtful response. I want to say, I want to defend Don Flint and the staff here. That was a right thing to do. And to consider expanding that available to other students, other faiths. The first word out is, they're just doing this for this group of people, and why don't you do it for this? And you peel the onion back a little and you find out what really is going on. It's an admirable thing. It was the right thing to do. So I caution us all that in this time when it's harder to keep track of communications, the media thing has changed so much, the social media especially, the impact of that and the quick news out there. Take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and wait. And wait for the full story to come out. So thank you.
I want to say I'm so happy that Mrs. Hoffman is going to be joining the board in July, and congratulate Mr. Casey and your continued service to the district. I think good things are coming. Well, that's great. June is like the season of recognition, right? So I wanted to just make you aware there were several musical ensembles from CODA who performed at Lincoln Center. How do you argue with that? And also for CODA, bless their hearts, the one day they lost power was the one day of academic recognition ceremony, and they did it anyhow. They moved venues to a room with a lot of windows, and they were able to carry on, and I give them a lot of credit for that. We have a senior, my habit of acknowledging student accomplishments, and we have a senior, Vincent Dengi, who's, I probably said his name wrong, I apologize for that, but he was on a team which finished in the top 20 teams in the nation of the National Automotive Technology Competition at the Javits Center, and I just thought that's not something we often have the opportunity to acknowledge, and I thought that it deserved a word. PTA's been busy. They did an amazing job with the transportation breakfast, and I know that bus drivers and staff were really happy about that. Scano Volunteer Appreciation Reception was a wonderful recognition of volunteers for PTA. And over the last 3 weeks, there have been 3 separate high school award ceremonies, and yes, I did count. There were 189 categories at least over those 3 nights, and there were often there was often more than one recipient. So if you think about the scope and scale of student acknowledgement, and also the scope and scale of the benefactors who support those scholarships, we have a lot to be grateful for. Looking forward, we have Flag Day at Oranjan coming up, and back to PTA for a second, the Reflections program theme for next year has been released, and it is Within Reach. That's the name of the Reflections theme for next year. So there's no reason why you can't start in the summer and get going on your Reflections submission. And then also I'd like to just acknowledge one of our community partners, Captain, has a Camp Captain Cares. It's a volunteer opportunity and community service opportunities for middle school students who often, because of their age, are not eligible to do other volunteer work that older students are able to do. So this is a really nice opportunity through, a really faithful partner of the school district for middle school students to get their feet wet in volunteering opportunities. And then the last thing that I would say is our valedictorian co-salutatorians have been announced, and we often have a lot of student speakers at graduation, and I always appreciate it, and I'm hopeful that they are going to be advised with modern technology that, enough with the selfies on the stage and the personal revelations and, the venue, mindfulness of the venue, coming out to graduation, which I so look forward to. So enough for me. Thank you.
Mr. Dahl. Thank you, Bill, for your comments. I also had something I'd like to add to that. Oftentimes, when it comes to anything that might be construed as a third rail issue, I'm the one that sticks his neck out and has something to say. There was a recent editorial, I believe it was in the Gazette, and they were talking about perhaps, well, they were talking about society in general, but they were talking about the idea that opinion is considered superior to fact in many people's minds, that they weren't open to fact. In fact, in reality, they would reject fact if it contrary to opinion. And obviously, that doesn't lead to very good decision-making or a very productive thought process. And I think we've seen some of that. I believe that most of the public has been protected against some of the more inflammatory emails that we've received that weren't the least bit civil. One of the things we try to promote here is civility. And it seems like when you have anonymity, which comes with social media and writing emails, that the normal filters that we impose upon ourselves when dealing with other people and what we say just get shut down completely. And I would warn all of us against that sort of thing. But I think the biggest comment, the most important comment that Bill made was that we really, really need to give people the benefit of the doubt. There seems to be this tendency, almost an overwhelming tendency, to assume the negative, to assume the worst case scenario. And it just is not the case. You're not dealing with a bunch of people up here or in these buildings that are that way. They're just not. They are here for the kids. They are here for the betterment of education. They are for the opening of minds, not trying to condition them to think in a certain mindset and to think that we are, in effect, trying to indoctrinate children. That's just totally wrong. And I think it's something that people need to hear and that they need to consider, because just take a step back, take a deep breath, look at the facts, look for the facts, consider them, and then perhaps have something to say. But then do it with civility.
My comments revolve around the meeting with the town, so I'll save those until we get to that action item on the agenda. That being said, before we jump into public comments, I'd like to ask the board, currently at action item 8 for the staffing recommendations, we're going to be going over, including the introduction of our soon-to-be new high school principal. And with your indulgence, I'd like to ask that we move that up during the tenure, after the tenure recommendations, to acknowledge our soon-to-be new principal. Everybody okay with that? Yeah. Okay. So could we have our student representatives, please, for their comments? While they're coming up, this is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. Are there any residents in attendance? If so, please, if you could stand up here and wait, that would be great. The board will not address specific comments, but will ask for your name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. The board reminds residents that the public comment portion of the meeting is only one item on a long agenda. We therefore ask that each speaker be as succinct as possible and the remarks limited to 2 to 3 minutes. We would also expect that residents speak in a respectful and courteous manner so as to model proper civility and decorum for our students. Residents may also contact us and email at boe@shenet.org. All questions come to the Office of Public Information and are shared with the board and superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions are addressed by the board president. Operational questions are addressed by the superintendent.
On behalf of the Senate, we just wanted to give the board a huge thanks for all the help and support this year. We had our ups and downs in the Senate, but it was a good and successful year for us, and we're looking forward for next year.
We really enjoyed working with all of you, and we have the officers for the 2017-2018 school year. Our president will be Sheridan Messier. Anisha Char will serve as vice president. Our treasurer is Sydney Warner. And then our 2 reps to the Board of Ed are Paige Ratsep and Maddie Smith.
Hi, I'm Paige Ratsep. I'm coming on to my 4th year of being in Senate now, and I just want to say that I'm really excited to have this opportunity to serve as a representative to the Board of Ed. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Maddie Smith, and this is my 2nd year in Senate, and running, I was just really excited to get involved, so thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Do we have any residents in attendance that want to speak?
Congratulations.
Good evening, I'm Don Flink. I'm currently the high school principal for a couple more days. And I also live at 16 Lindenwood Drive in Boston Lake. I just wanted to publicly take the time to thank some people in the room tonight. For the last 10 years, I've had the privilege of being the high school principal. And I know that there are probably many in the room breathing a sigh of relief with my recent foray into the world media, national media. I'll be riding off into the sunset soon. I'm actually here tonight in support of the recommendation of the new high school principal, but also to really take the opportunity to thank the current Board of Education and the past members of the Board of Education, as well as Dr. Robinson, who gave me an opportunity 10 years ago. And I appreciate everything that you've done for me, the support I've received, probably even when it wasn't deserved or you may not have wanted to support me on something. I really appreciate it, and I certainly hope and expect that you'll give the same level of respect and support to the new high school principal. So I appreciate everything you've done for me.
Okay. Appears there are no others, so let's move into the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flint. He saved the embarrassment that Mr. Presley's coming in, so I'll just pause here for Mr. Presley to enter. And I don't know, Bob, if you had any comments before.
Yes,
Perfect time.
my apologies for being late. I would like to thank everybody for allowing me to attend, as well as my family to be with me when our son graduated or moved up from Acadia. Great to see these kids leaving middle school, key milestone in their life, and it definitely was worth being there, and I appreciate your indulgence in allowing me to do it. So thank you very much, appreciate it.
So can we share the mic?
I enjoyed
Yes, Mr. Gilbert did a great job in your absence. A couple minutes later, you'd have been replaced. Just joking. On a very serious note, Mr. Flint offered some comments, and I too is going to use this opportunity, like I've done in the last several weeks, to acknowledge Don and his leadership here in the high school. And it's most apropos that Don actually spoke with the pending recommendation of his replacement coming on board. And also I want to express, I think, Mr. Casey's comment and Mr. DeLallo's comment following is symbolic to I think, the type of leadership direction that we are committed to as a school district, in the sense that at the end of the day, our goal is to try to do the right things for all kids, recognizing that kids come with a wide variety of experiences, wide variety of exposures and perspectives. And when they're in this environment, we're always trying to juggle how do we best try to meet those various demands, and at the same time deal with the adult influences that sometimes we have to contend with. And we all wake up every day. In a very personal note, it's been a tough week because I've received and Kelly has received, and kudos to Mrs. DeFisciana, some of the most hated things that anyone could put in writing. And I think, how sad is that? Because we're all in the business for young people, and it's so apropos that we have here tonight a lot of young people who are being recognized for the good things that they do. We have a lot of good things here in this community. We have a lot of good things here in this school. We have a lot of committed people to ensure that the experience for kids is quality, top-notch, and we don't apologize for trying to provide a top-notch experience for kids all the time. We know it's a challenge, and that's why we wake up every day looking forward to embrace the challenge. And we want people in the system who are willing to embrace the challenge, because our kids are going to a wide, big world, and we want them to recognize that they have to juggle ups and downs and challenges all the time. And how do we provide them that mindset, that growth mindset, to be open to different things? So I really appreciate the support of the board. Certainly, I know Mr. Flint appreciate that as well, and I appreciate his leadership over the past 10 years, and we're looking forward to the next 2 decades with the new principal, since he has young kids. Just saying. Just a couple other quick little notes. Mrs. Hoffman is at the end, just to remind of the board, on the 14th, we'll be doing a orientation session, and for the public, when new board members come aboard, we have pretty much an all-day orientation, and certain Mrs. Stevens will remember that. It's just probably 4 or 5 hours where essentially the new person is introduced not only to the district, but also the governance role and responsibility of the board. And I think that lends to our functionality in terms of governance and leadership, so we can coincide and be in sync with each other on things. And so sometimes the public looks at the board meeting and say, oh, there's never a controversy between the board. Well, it's because we do a lot of information sharing. Board members read a lot of things in advance and come prepared to the meetings, and so things happen to run seamlessly most times, and that's a good thing when you think about preparation. And so Mrs. Hoffman will be introduced to all that on the 14th, and we hope that she will return on the 20th after being introduced to all that. So we appreciate that. 2 other notes for calendar purposes, and I failed to inform the board earlier. On the 8th, the Team 20 Robotics will be doing their recognition event at 7 o'clock High School West, if I'm not mistaken, High School West Auditorium. So if you're available on June 8th to attend that, it's a great recognition for the Team 20 Robotics team. And also on June 9th, Friday, June 9th at 6, we'll be hosting here at the Shen Track the Relay for Life event. And so we've hosted that for many years, and in a couple of years they moved away, but they're back again, and it's something that we look forward to as a community. It's a great community outreach, and so we know that most people will be preparing for the Green and White Gala that night. So if you really want to come dressed up and come out and say hi and then run to the gala, we appreciate it. But I just want to make sure the board is aware that we're hosting that event, the Relay for Life here, and we hope the weather's nice, and we have many people come out to support a very good cause as we move forward as well. So, Todd, you want me to, sorry, Mr. President.
All right. So we'll continue with tenure recommendation / high school principal staffing recommendation. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, sorry.
No problem.
Good evening. We have 2 tenure recommendations tonight. I'd like the 2 folks to come forward if they could. The first one is Lauren Lusinger. Is Lauren here? Yes. Lauren is a special education teacher in our functional skills development class at Octay. And her recommendation, sorry, Lauren. Her recommendation was written by Principal Lisa Mickle. Lauren, in the functional skills development class, has shown exceptional growth over the past 3 years. She has a thorough understanding of the functional skills, and she's the go-to person for anything to do with our special education students. So there's lots more that I could go into, but congratulations. Oh, I'd like to recommend her.
She's on the line?
Yeah. No, she's our teacher, tenure. We also have an administrative tenure recommendation, and that is Mrs. Peg Warner. Is Peg here tonight?
No, she's not.
Okay. Peg is a special education academic administrator that works at the high school. Peg has earned her tenure being with us for the 3 years. Her tenure was written by Michelle Mylod, her direct supervisor. Peg has promoted co-teaching in the high school. She embodies a leader who promotes a vision of learning. She collaborates. She also is kind of a ball of fire and has really done a lot at the high school. So we are recommending her for tenure this evening. I will be coming back to her on the 20th of June because she has another opportunity and she will be leaving us, but it's not official. I think that's where she is tonight. But we would like to, she earned the tenure, we'd like to recommend her for the tenure process. Okay, so Lauren Lusinger.
You want a motion?
Yeah, can we have a motion, Mr. Casey, second Mrs. Rajat. Any comments, questions? All in favor?
Congratulations.
Congratulations. And Mrs. Peg Warner.
Mrs. Peg Warner, can I have a motion for the administrator? Mrs. Stevenson, any second? Mrs. Rajat, any comments, questions on this particular motion? Okay, all in favor?
Thank you.
All right.
And now,
the
principal.
After an extensive search process and with many committees, and it says a lot that at least 2 of our students who are on the committees are here tonight, Anisha and Matilda. I'm not sure if any of the other students, but the students came tonight too. As we're proud to recommend Mr. Ron Agostinoni, I have to keep practicing his name, as our new high school principal. And I also want to say thank you very much to Don. He's been been very gracious as he's transitioning into another opportunity and also trying to help us orchestrate this process. So Mr. Agustinoni is currently at Maple Hill High School in the Schodack School District. He began his career in education as a high school social studies teacher. He served as an assistant principal, and he has been a principal at Schodack for the last 7 years. We're proud to recommend him for the leadership team. He is here tonight with his wife, Michelle, and one of his 4 daughters. They're right in the front row. And Ron, if you'd like to come up, please. His daughters' names are Reagan, Kaylin, Adeline, and Landry. I think you may know what sports team he is and if not, it's the Dallas Cowboys, and that was the one comment that students, that everyone made on the site visit. I think it was a positive comment, but we'll have to talk. So that's our recommendation.
Okay, go ahead and make a motion, please, Mrs. Blaber. And second, Mrs. Rajat. Any comments or questions? Go ahead, Mrs. Blaber.
I appreciated the privilege to sit in on the interviews. And, you know, to coin a phrase from a movie, you kept saying, and you had me at, it's all about the kids, right? And you said it over and over, and that's where I just said this is the right one for us, because that was the priority, and that was a priority that we heard at the site visits, and I just really appreciated that, and I'm happy to make the motion to accept that recommendation.
And,
Mr. Casey.
Another person who participated for the community. This is Mr. A. You don't have to worry about all those letters after that. We learned that from the Maple Hill students and faculty alike. I don't think you've been there 7 years. I don't know if many of them can pronounce your last name, right? So it's Mr. A.
Any other comment?
I'm a little concerned about the Dallas Cowboys.
I'll make one comment, and I think when we accepted Don's resignation, we had a moment of trepidation as to how this was going to work, and I would like to applaud Dr. Robinson, Mrs. Bush, and the district staff on how well this was brought forward, an extremely deliberate and fair and honest process. By the time I was involved, one of the things that came through was the level of consistency. And I think this process had quite a few steps where it could winnow out somebody who was not consistent. And I think that's something we really look forward to in this district. Not only you, but just the level of consistency you conveyed in the process as to who you are. You're very authentic and you're very consistent, and we look forward to seeing you for many years. Any other comments? Okay, motion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. Okay, I think next up is information items, starting with the showcase of the athletic department. Mr. Coleman, please.
Sure. As Mr. Coleman come forward, just want to highlight not only we have tonight the athletic department, we also have a fairly brief overview of the CAC plan now I say that from Mr. Ripchip because the board is familiar with the plan. It's more so just the new members of the CAC committee that Mr. Ripchip will be outlining for the board member, and I'll have some comments related to the budget exit poll after that as well.
Good evening. Again, thank you to the Board of Education and Dr. Robinson, obviously, for their continued support of our athletic program. This is our third and final time we're up here for the year. I do want you to know that it was an incredibly trying spring this year with the weather. It rained a little bit, and I think, Mr. Gilbert, if you know, you get the daily updates as to the changes that was going on. I do want to thank Al Karam in Transportation and Ken Patnode in Buildings and Grounds, who it's a daily challenge to say, you know, you're working with 15 other schools and trying to get games in for kids and doing all the things, and they're very cooperative in trying to make that happen. I know it's great that Sheridan's here. We have our meeting tomorrow, right, 3 o'clock. We've already started our planning for homecoming and Fan Fest, so we'll be getting together tomorrow to start working on that. I think the Senate's in great hands with her in a leadership capacity. Just for this year, our teams won 12 sectional championships, 2 state championships. We had numerous regional champions, countless league champions. Number of student athletes were sectional and state champions. We got our track team that you'll hear about in a minute. It's going on. The class of 2017 will be one of the greatest athletic classes in the history of the program. In the last 3 years, to put it into perspective for you, the class of 2015, 16, 17 have won over 40 sectional championships, which is pretty much, it's kind of, I would put it up against anybody is my point. Next Tuesday, we conduct our annual professional development for coaches, where we do a training for all the coaches in the athletic department. We get together from modified all the way up to varsity, and we conduct our annual professional development, so we're looking forward to that. Tonight, we have 2 teams here with us. The first team we have is their annual participants here. The coach is here so much, you probably think he's a board member. He probably is up here so much. But we'd like to bring up our girls track and field team and Coach Rob Cloutier and Keith Jordan. Come on up. And Rob, you got some of your girls here with you. I know you'd mentioned, come on up, girls. I know we have a smaller crowd here from girls track and field. Rob was telling me a bunch of them had exams tomorrow, so they were home studying. And I see Coach Chico's here as well, too. He's no longer an athlete, but is now a coach with us in our program. The girls track and field team, they won their 5th straight sectional title this year. It's the most points ever scored in Section 2 history. They scored 194 points. If anybody's a track person in here, I know Mr. Lyle, you have a history in track, you would know that they scored more points total than the second and third place teams combined. What Rob has done with the program is incredible. Their dominance is tremendous, but more importantly, and Rob will talk about it, they're very much committed to a process to help athletes achieve their maximum potential. So without further ado, I'll turn over to Rob for a quick minute. Thank you. Yeah, sure.
Not very good at signing into my phone here. So, like Chris just said, as I was driving here and trying to figure out, we've been up here quite a few times recently over the years, and, it's 5 in a row, sectional titles, and I did some research. We had our awards yesterday, and, you're so focused on what's going on in the moment, and didn't realize we had lost in 3 years. So that's an incredible streak for a lot of these girls that are up here, especially upperclassmen. What I'd like to talk to you about, though, is has anybody read Good to Great by Jim Collins? Great book, great read, no matter what field of life you're in. And he talks about in this book, get the right people on the bus. And so I may just be the head coach, but on a daily basis, I'm working with a group of distance runners who tend to be the weirdest ones on the team, just like me. But I have an amazing staff. I have coaches that Keith has been here for 5, 6, 7 years, who knows. Jen actually ran for me, and if Jen was ever allowed to come up here, she would tell you things that were not good about me, mistakes I made, that you're trying to encourage a young girl on a bad performance, and it's a really good inside joke that I'm not going to let her tell you. And then, of course, Mallory Baker and Emily Lewick and Mike Marino, who aren't here, but it's just tremendous to work with these guys, because what they've done is we've taken something, we've got the right people on the bus, and then we established a process, and that process is our goal. And I know that's like a cliche thing to say, but what we've done is we've tried to make that what the kids can focus on, and making them know that if you can focus on what you control, then you've got something there. And then continually honing and evaluating that process honestly. But more important than those ideas or the outcomes that you've heard, our top priority is really relationships. And I guarantee I could have every single kid I coach come up here, and they would testament to that. So we've got a little hashtag FEO that we've used all season long for each other. And I was signaling it to them before they ran the relay on Friday as we hosted the state qualifiers. But just to let you know what's moving forward, we have our state championship meet, which is Friday, Saturday down at Union Endicott. They're in large school girls, so the state is split, large school and small school. We're obviously large school, and everybody doesn't like us for that, but there's 27 opportunities for a girl to make the state meet. There's 3 relays, 4 girls in a relay, 15 individual events. Our girls took 18 of those 27 spots. We have more girls going to the state meet than any other school in the state. And they have an opportunity to win the state meet, which is unofficial in New York. They don't count it. They score it. They don't count it. Those going are Jill Shippey, who texted me on my way in here. She's in Providence, Rhode Island, because the hammer throw is not an event that's widely contested in New York. So she goes all the way to Providence on a Tuesday and wins the event, breaks her own state record, is #1 in the country. So she's going to throw the shot put at the state meet, and she won it indoors, and she's looking to repeat as a senior in outdoor. Bree Jordan in the discus throw, Alex Tudor in the long and the triple, and they all have a shot at podium on Friday night. Jenny McLaughlin in the pole vault. Hannah Reale, who's not here in the 800, is the defending large school state champion as a junior. She's actually our Section 2 record holder, which she ran in the wind by herself on Thursday night. And then we have 3 relays. Our 4x1, which is Melissa Haas, Emily Schaefer, Alex Tudor, and Kelly Hamlin, have a shot at podium both on Friday and Saturday. Our 4x4 has a shot at podium as well. Kelly Hamlin, Rita Ceramic, Ali Arcirio, and Jade Dennis. And our 4x8 has a shot at defending their indoor state title, and that'll be Jada Dennis, Olivia Lomascolo, Julia Zacco, and Hannah Reale. And then another week later, we'll send a group down to Greensboro, North Carolina for the Nationals. Jill Shippey having an opportunity to defend her national title from a year ago on the hammer throw. Hannah Reale will run the 800 and has a shot at winning that race at the national championships. Alex Tudor will contest the long jump. And then we have 2 relays. Our sprint medley, which is Melissa Haas, Kelly Hamlin, Alex Tudor, and Hannah Reale. They're #2 in the country. It's not an event that's commonly run, but they broke the Section 2 record by 15 seconds by themselves earlier in the season, and they'll go down to Greensboro and look to do something big. And then our 4x-mile relay, 4 girls run a mile each, and that's Charlotte Hartman, Olivia Lomascolo, Hannah Reale, and Julia Zacco are actually seeded ahead of the national record. That doesn't mean that'll happen, but it means that that's a really good relay that has a shot at least being All-American and possibly winning. So that's enough for me. I do, really quick, one of our seniors who's been around for a long time, I just asked her to say a few things.
All right, so the other day I was thinking to myself, I was like, so when did my track team become my family? And I've been on a fair share amount of sports teams. I think I've been playing organized sports probably since the 2nd grade. And I realized I couldn't pinpoint a time because they've always been my family. And I think that's what this program is, and I want to thank everyone for that.
I just want to say one thing too, as much as, and as big as this program is, and they take on middle schoolers too, I mean, that inside program over the fall was amazing. You guys did an incredible job, and you make them all feel important, and you rise them, and you help them, and that says a lot to you guys. So congratulations, girls, and thank you for all you do.
And just so you know, I mean, our track program is pretty large at Shenendehowa. Our coaches, they'll coach over, between the boys and girls and the modified team, we have over 500 student athletes participating in our track program. So it's a pretty impressive program. As much as we like all those programs, this is always our favorite team to showcase every year. 4 years ago, we were one of 7 schools in New York State to begin playing unified sports. When I hear Dr. Robinson talk about we don't apologize for the things we do, and I hear other board members saying that, one of the things I'm really proud of is that we were committed to the unified sports program 7 years ago when there were a ton of questions about how we were going to get this up off the ground. Every section in New York State now has unified basketball. They've seen our program as a pioneering program. They held their culminating event this weekend. Some of them got their medals on.
I don't.
And this is the wonderfully talented, outstanding coach of our unified bowling team and our unified basketball team, Coach Galarno, who does an absolutely fantastic job. And she's assisted by Rob Weeks, who is our wrestling coach, but is also our youth activation coordinator. So I want to have Carly come up just to talk real quick about the team.
Thank you. Trying not to take too much time. First and foremost, thank you for inviting us here every spring. We look forward to it. And thank you for your support, the Board of Education, Dr. Robinson, especially Mr. Coleman, who is always there. He's present. He's available to us, and he is one of our biggest fans. So thank you for your continued support. First and foremost as well, before I forget, 2 of our 3 teachers' aides are here, and they are usually behind the scenes. They deal with it all from as soon as the kids get off the bus in the morning until the very end of our practices and games. So I'm going to embarrass them for a second. Patty Bro and Tina Hurley, step up, please, and maybe wave to the crowd. These women, thank you so much. Without their help, without their guidance, our program does not run. So I hope that everyone understands how important, and I hope you understand how much I appreciate your help. So thank you very, very much. To the parents, thank you as well. Our season was a success. Our unified bowling season was a success as well. We had a good time. You never know what's going to happen. A lot of unpredictable moments, but there's always a lot of laughs. There's always a lot of growth. And my favorite part is just the progress that we see from start to finish. And just kind of the moments, the small moments that make for a really magical experience. So, the kids getting their jerseys, it's always my favorite day. The looks on their faces when I get to wear this for the season. How proud they are when they get on the bus. And you might not know by the amount that's here today, but we are fighting for the biggest team at Shen. We might have more players than the varsity football team does. We have a group of, I believe, 25 was on our roster this year. So it's great. It shows, what type of support that we get and how excited the kids are to play. So to the partners and to the athletes, thank you for a great experience. I hope that you had a great time, and thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
We had a senior night a couple weeks ago. They get our student athletes that are participants in the unified basketball program experience all the things that the student athletes that play football or other sports experience. It's a tremendous program for us. It's one we take a lot of pride in. But I really do. I want to thank Michelle Mylod for her support through special education, Dr. Robinson, the Board of Education. Mrs. Bush helps us out with the units and everything to make sure that we have with the program paid for. But this is a tremendously important program to our athletic program. Okay, we believe very strongly in it. We believe in the foundation, the mission of what NISPA and what Special Olympics is trying to do together, and we look forward to that support down the road. So again,
How are you?
I'm doing unbelievable.
Thank you.
Did you have a good season this year?
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, thanks again, Mr. Coleman, and certainly our student athletes. We appreciate it very much, and all our parents. Thank you for your support. And Mr. A, just for Mr. A's purposes, I know that you're already entrenched, but I'm sure your little one would love to get home and be in bed at a decent time. So don't feel if you have to leave. We won't be insulted. Okay.
Absolutely.
So appreciate it. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you. We'll see you soon. Thank you. She is. Look at her. She's a sweetie pie.
Dr. Robinson, Board of Education, and I'd like to thank you for having us here again tonight. We're just going to do a quick summary of the Counseling Advisory Committee. I'd like to introduce Vicki Werthmuller. She is one of our parent representatives. She's actually our postgraduate parent. One of the ideas we had several years ago was to have a parent member go beyond the 4 years of having their children with us at Shenendehowa and have them come in to provide us feedback and their thoughts in a post-grad year. Vicki's also the co-chair with me this year, so I wanted to thank her for her many years of service for us. And her two wonderful young boys are in college. So tonight we're gonna move quickly through some points. If there's some questions, feel free to ask them. So moving off the first page, noticing a year at a glance. I'm going to just talk briefly about that. Vicki's going to talk about our recommendations and moving forward. This year, we again presented the model of RAMP. We'll be in July attending. I'll be representing the school district to accept that award on behalf of the counseling department. The Naviance program will continue to do PD work and try to stay up to date on what the software product provides us. The district continues to contract, will continue to contract out with them, and we'll do our best to stay up to date and learn as much as we can and provide the resources to our students as it changes. Financial Aid Night, one of the big changes this year for the group was to move the Financial Aid Night up earlier. In fact, it's tonight.
No parking.
It was a full parking lot over at High School West. The idea behind that was to be reflective of the FAFSA change form. So as the colleges continue to do things differently, we'll monitor them and adjust accordingly to benefit our students. The writing labs is in reference to that English senior essay. We again received assistance from the English department teachers, and the students took advantage of that opportunity. We're going to continue to do that. Just as well, let you know, the English department, as a first assignment, all senior classes will be doing their senior essay. Communication, folks have talked at length tonight about communications. We recognize the importance of that, and one of the things that we really worked hard on this last year as a department and relayed out to the CAC was that we're going to continue to maintain our communications. The timeline of when we communicate out is important. We've utilized different venues for communicating this year aside from our newsletters, which we updated. We use the portal with the principal. We use the Facebook page. If any of you have gotten a chance to take a look at the Facebook page, Jan Riley, one of the counselors, has done an incredible job trying to provide resources to parents and students, as well as we're dabbling in Twitter. Mr. Coleman is I got to get on his list of learning on how to do that. And just some of the things he's put out there have been great, and we'd like to follow suit with that. Survey results. One of the things that we did this year as well is we've partnered with High School Partnership Team, and they've allowed us the opportunity to utilize the results of their senior exit survey, and we provided that information to the CAC members for review. If you're not familiar with the senior exit survey, that survey is done at the end of the senior year. We actually just did it, and this year as a partnership with the counseling department, we were able to survey every single senior. So we got feedback from every senior.
I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to serve on this council. It's been a wonderful experience, and really enjoyed and appreciated it. A few things that the committee's been working on. First is Jessica Leahy coming September 5th, 2017. We're excited about that. There's a plan in place. There's a team in place. Things are rolling along, and that should be a really, really good presentation. Next, the evaluation of the CAC document. We're working through all the various requirements, standards, recommendations, guidelines for advisory councils. We have our Shenendehowa district document that we want to stay true to, and we want to maintain those priorities, but we're also looking at making it clear that we're meeting what ASCA, the Counseling Association, recommends and what the New York State Education Department is going to be requiring for advisory committees. So that's something we're working through. As Paul said, we continue to look at data, continue to look at surveys. One good thing is we're combining the partnership team said they could combine the exit survey and the post-grad survey. So now seniors only have to take one survey instead of two, which we're hoping will be a good thing for them. And last, the current thing we're working on is making sure we have time in our meeting in the process of the year for counselors to come and share ideas they're thinking of for goals for next year. What are they seeing? What would they like to think of as a goal for the following year, and making sure we have an opportunity to give them feedback. So we're thinking our January meeting will be that time that we consistently have a time for them to do that. Moving forward, building intrinsic motivation in students, just a small thing, not a big program, not a big plan. There'll be a good follow-up to the gift of failure with Jessica Leahy. She's got some really good insight on external rewards and intrinsic motivation, so that'll be good to look into. Supporting staff as it relates to mental health issues facing our students, of course, that continues to be something we're concerned about, making sure they have the resources they need, that they're effective and efficient, and they can respond appropriately to students and have everything they need for that.
And lastly is eliminating barriers to student opportunities. The counselors have introduced us to this phrase, which is self-selecting or self-selection. And sharing an example of a student who may be looking at a course and there is a resource that's required for the course that they don't feel like their family could provide. And therefore, they self-select themselves right out of that and will not take that class, not even talk to their counselor, not even figure out if they can take that class. So thinking about, do students know there's assistance available? Do students know how to ask for that assistance? How do we inform parents that, yes, there are things that your student may need for a class, and keep them informed, but yet get that barrier out of there so students don't decide they don't even consider a class that might be a really good opportunity for them. So that's it.
Next question, Vicki. So has the role of parent on this been what you expected, or what have you gotten out of it?
You know, I think it's been encouraging to see how committed the staff at Shen is to our students. They really, really, really want to help our students, not only academically do the best they can, but to have the skills to be successful human beings, to have integrity, and to be able to go out in the world and do the things they're supposed to do. So it's just been really encouraging, and to see other parents and to talk to students and to talk to teachers and to have all those stakeholders in the room all seeing the same thing and having the same goal. It's really encouraging. So it's been great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just need a clarification.
Sure.
Counseling Advisory Committee and the advisory committee or council that's recommended in the counseling K through 12 plan, those are two separate entities, right? Because CAC was established for high school counseling, and that other, probably as yet to be formed group would be different because it would have a K through 12 perspective. Am I understanding that right?
That's one of the models. The state's going to mandate a council. The question, and I'm going to be speaking with folks at the state as it pertains to individual levels-wise, can you do it that way versus a K-12 one, or is the K-12 model one that they're going to have all schools do?
So I think part of the question is that we were many years ahead. And quite frankly with you, so when, and Mrs. Carmen is also sitting on a couple of the statewide committees as well, and they will never say it's the Shen model, but I would think that our models are influencing a lot of what the state's going to do. So at some point, I anticipate a recommendation will be come back to the board to say how do we look at those different mandates and fold them into a more comprehensive committee. Again, not knowing all the requirements, it's kind of hard to say what it's going to look like, but anticipate that's probably best. Otherwise, you're going to have these fringe groups that sound familiar, look familiar, and who's really on what. And so it's a good thing that the state is seeing that the benefit of this. And I think Vicki's comment was perfect of what we wanted, to have parents who otherwise probably wouldn't have been that engaged in the system, to be engaged in the system, contribute to the system. And so I anticipate, Mary, that in a year from now, we'll be looking to some type of merging of those type things as we move forward. But again, we have the benefit of having a plan that has proven to be effective. And so we're starting from a good foundation.
And so because of the stakes at the high school level and the importance of counseling at the high school level on their future plans and goals and so on, what I would really hope and encourage is that there is a separateness of this CAC as the charter was established for high school. Call it whatever you want to, it doesn't matter. And the compliant regulatory oversight group or committee is different. Because it may overlap, in a Venn diagram kind of way, but that the focus of this group remains true to what the charter was.
Yeah, I understand. Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, Mrs. Carmen.
You got exit survey.
Oh, exit survey. Totally forget about the exit survey. So I'm going to walk through the budget exit survey for the board's purposes here. This is not an unfamiliar document for the board, so You should certainly, and one of the things that the benefit of us over the years doing this exit survey, it gives us some interesting trend data to kind of look at things over the course of time and not either being down in one year or when I say down, psychologically down or psychologically excited because you don't have a comparison point or point of reference. So just to give you this, for example, one of the things that we always watch is participation. We always look when the high numbers happen and ask the question, what was happening then? That caused certain spikes. And just to give you an example, we saw the spike with the land sale, and then the question became for that, what will happen with numbers with the vote? And you saw that the numbers with the vote are kind of similar to the past couple of years, mid 3,000s in terms of voter turnout. So while we are still hoping that this number was higher than the last, the May prior, we hope this number keep going up. But again, why it's going up is always the question that we have to ponder. A big piece of the equation and again, we even look at the survey results and some of those things. I mean, the comparable, if you look at percentages, somewhat comparable to the number of people who are filling out the exit poll survey. So we could say, okay, then we could draw some fairly legitimate conclusions, if you will, between those two things as we move forward. So I'm just going to, any question on this slide before I change? So how do you vote became, and the reason why we look at this, we always try to look between the margin of yes to no and what's that? Are we tightening it up? Are we getting wider? And that's always a good thing that we get a large majority, because not only is a vote on the budget, but it's also an opportunity for public confidence in terms of what we're doing, the governance, the leadership of the district as well. So we're pleased to see that the margin for 17 was very similar to the margin for 16, and that kind of gives you some sense of, even with the land vote sequence, you see some various similarities between the last several years, which is always a thing. What's the bounce back effect, if you will, after coming off a no vote? What's the impact of that? And so we're pleased to see that margin difference, and especially when the numbers are very comparable from the prior year. So that was a good thing to see that piece of it, separation of the two referendums. The things that kind of drive people to vote, we always do this because we always want to, because you hear things, everybody wants this. Well, really, how much? And, to what degree? And just because the last 10 people you ran into are saying the same thing doesn't mean the next 100 people would agree with that. And so we always try to figure out how do we not have an overreaction to things, almost back to Mr. Casey's point of sometimes you hear the doubt and and people give you the doubt but never the benefit of the doubt. And so I was trying to figure out how we use this to try to drive some of the things and look at the consistency. Quality education has been the top area that people have focused on, and clearly that's what drives us, what we do all the time. Spending is kind of interesting one because, it was a hot commodity and it kind of been somewhat consistent, but still, again, it's a significant majority. I don't want to discount that piece of it as well. And then the tax rate. The tax rate is an interesting one, I think, because people always juxtapose, if the tax rate was low and the quality was lousy, people would be complaining. And I think when you have quality, people are like, okay, you know what? I'm willing to pay for something that's worthwhile. And that's a typical sentiment when you even go to your store, you pick up one item versus another item. You're willing to pay a little bit more for something that you think is of better quality. So this kind of reflects, I guess, what I would call the typical buying patterns for people when they buy or invest in something. And so we're cognizant of that. This is one that we always try to figure out. We always kind of do this combine of excellent and good category, recognizing that, okay, we'll take either one of those in some degree based on the situation. Maybe you take fair, but certainly the excellent and the good are the two areas. And when you look at the combined numbers all the way through for the past several years, you see a very comparable total in terms of where people feel as if the quality and the direction of the school district is important, because the direction of the school district, certainly the board, the direction of the school district, certainly the administration and staff, it's a collective direction. And so we're always pleased to see that this number stays very similar from year to year as we move forward. Then we kind of break it down a little bit and it kind of goes into the tax piece, because it's always one of those areas you hear people talk about, or should I say one of those areas that's often addressed in the media, newspaper, otherwise. What's the tax impact? That's what everybody always goes to that. So we talk about, the reasonableness reasonableness of taxes, and so we kind of, is it reasonable, is it too high, is it too low? We hope that someday we have a huge too low, but I don't think we'll ever see that piece of it. But the reasonableness piece of it is what we're looking for. Recognizing that the bottom line is, people are always going to say, well, I wish we didn't have to, but okay, since we do, I'm okay with doing it. It's a kind of translation of the reasonableness piece of it. So we always look at that piece and saying, where are these numbers going? And these were some of the tight years where quite frankly with you, we were taxing and cutting at the same time. And I think that was a kind of a mixed feeling for people. You're taxing me, but you're cutting programs. And so we saw that during some of those tight years that it's not the taxes were proportionally significantly different. I think it's just other things that were happening at the same time during the budget sequence in those periods. And so we saw some of that. And so now we're starting to see the greater uptick, particularly on the reasonable side of the taxes. And plus, when you look at our budget's been pretty flatline. Our budget increases and tax impact have been pretty flatline over the past several years. So you see some of those type things as well. And this is one of those that we always kind of put out as a try balloon, that if we had to go over the tax cap, how favorable is that? Because it's a 60% majority. And so you see here, we fluctuate right around that. So right now, there's not a whole bunch of people who are super excited about that possibility. And we don't know what circumstances would lend us to be in that situation to have to do that. But we always kind of put this little try balloon out there just to kind of get some feel of that piece of it as we move forward. Again, I'm not going to go through all these, but this just kind of give you some sense of what people see as very important and the things that we focus on. Clearly, the quality of staff and the hiring process is vital, and you've seen tonight is a perfect example of that. We go through some pretty extensive processes to make sure that we get good people coming into the system and making decisions when things aren't working out very well to make sure we keep the people in the system. And so this kind of gives you some gauge of some of the things and how those things have translated over the years as we move forward. The one that's interesting, because and I always point to the kindergarten one, you saw, roughly back in 2011, it wasn't a huge issue, but over the years, you see the kindergarten piece, a slight uptick. So we saw a big jump up and then kind of stabilize where I would say certainly more than 50% of the people still see having full-day K as actually this is kindergarten transportation. Full-day K transportation below. Full-day K as something that we have to look at. So this is always one of those that we kind of keep on the horizon in terms of prioritization. But this gives you a good flavor, though, of the things that people kind of see as some of our hot button areas that we have to keep focus on as we move forward. The information piece is something that we try to figure out all the time. Where's people getting information from, and how and why people get information. And so the April vote was the land vote. So that sequence is in there. So we always trying to look at, okay, is there a difference between where people got information from budget versus land? This was like the first time we had a different off-cycle vote that we could do a quick comparison to, and we saw some differences in terms of where people receive information from in certain years. I mean, so for instance, with the land vote, you saw a great uptick on people information from the media piece in some years than you see here. The Times Union, for instance, 46 versus 56, and television 24 versus 25, because budget to budget is 24 to 23. So when you saw the budget piece, you see people get information from certain things, and so we look at this and we start thinking about, okay, what shifts, what adjustments, what tweaks, or otherwise do we make in terms of how we communicate. The good thing or bad thing is a lot of media just scraps up of our website and replicated in their respective venues in many cases. So it then have to be more cognizant of how and what information we put on the website, and how people are grabbing that information becomes an important part of the equation. One area that we've really focused on is some of the areas, again, particularly some of the social media, Twitter pieces. While these percentages may not seem significant, this is one of those areas that social media is a shared venue, and so one person may get it, but the question is where the information is going all the time from one person to the next. Mr. Stevenson.
I think the most notable there is the PTA on that land. Go up to 68% at the bottom there. When you look around that, go to the bottom.
Yeah, I'm just trying to wait till this thing get out of the way.
Only because I think, you know, as the liaison sat there and explained and the conversation ensued, that's an interesting phenomenon to me.
I was looking at the website and the electronic and the lack of electronic use, and I think that might be indicative of the people that voted, potentially not using those.
Oh, yeah, it's always there. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Because when we look at, we have statistics, for instance, on our website, we have tens of thousands of people that hit, and we can tell what things that they're hitting too. So it's interesting how to translate all the time. But again, the part of doing this is to show, one, that there's a wide variety of communication media that's being used and how we try to provide information to a wide variety of mechanisms. And so from the conversations to this is we started the Shen YouTube video and some of those kind of things. And, you know, it's a very particular market that actually go and watch YouTube videos, but we know that's a market. And so how do we try to keep that on the as one of the options as well. So communications, we always talk about that because one of the big parts of the board, how well are we communicating, what's that piece of it, and we have seen some similar progressions in communications over the long haul, and in terms of the land communication, you see it's an interesting split with the some yes and sometimes piece of the land, and because otherwise you've seen almost 2-to-1 progression in terms of that piece of it. So part of what we, again, looking at the trends in budget over time, because this was a budget piece of it, but we had that information from the land sale. Where people live is always one, and this is consistent also with the number, population proportionality for the most part. I wouldn't say 1-to-1, but it's not that far off, and we're always trying to watch that. I would say Half Moon is probably still lower percentage for people responding to the survey than population, but again, we don't know who all the people who voted that didn't do the survey, how many people are Half Moon versus not Half Moon, so it's kind of hard to draw a conclusion, but we have seen some consistencies over the years with this piece of it. We're still waiting for that one person who lives on the border of Stillwater to fill out the survey. So that's always the one we look at. This is another one that we look at too, is in terms of age. And people who are voting on the budget. It's always one of those type things that we look at, because we have gone through years. 10 years ago, it's like, oh my God, it was the 65 plus population people thought were the people voting no against the budget. Well, I'm not sure how true that was then. And so we try to look at this, kind of see what's the demographics of people who come out to vote on what, and so this kind of gives us some flavor. And so when you start looking at when you look at the land sale versus the budget, you see some comparable pieces here, and you saw some uptick here, but for the most part, still this is the one area that we saw the big difference between people who came on land, people between that 31 to 50, pretty much people with kids in upper level schools now, or in some cases kids with school-age kids. Parents potential. So we saw this was an interesting piece, and so, but it was kind of interesting to see how this pans out as we move forward. And so we kind of look backwards and see how those demographics, are we seeing some significant shifts in the population, age population of people who are coming to vote or not. So that's one of those things we try to monitor for a wide reason. People who have kids in the school district versus people who don't have kids in the school. We try to break it down: private, parochial, homeschool, preschool, no child under 8. So the whole kit and caboodle, just try to get a difference. And one of the notable difference that we saw, that a significant number of the people voting on the land had no children under 18. And so that was one of those things popped up, because when you look back on this demographic and compare it to the past years, it's about comparable again. So there was an uptick in the type of demographics that came out largely for the land sale on that piece of it. So part of what we want to see, was that a trend that's going to continue or not, but the trend kind of shifted back to where the trend has been in the past. And so as we move forward, we want to say, okay, is truly shifting back, or is, so it's kind of hard to draw a conclusion on one year, but we could look back and say, okay, it's somewhat comparable to the past years. So that's where some of the data points come in with that piece of it. The Shen, children in Shen, what grade levels, and we try to get some sense of, parents with kids, what percentage, what schools, and again, you see some very comparable. Younger parents have a tendency to come out more than parents with older kids, and so we've seen this, and this has been very, very comparable over the years in that piece of it. Not far off, but still enough to say that there's a somewhat of that tendency, and not enough to say, whoa, wow, we don't have parents completely divorce the system once the kids start secondary. That's not the case, but sure, there's a slight difference between the two things, and that's all it's showing. I can't draw any conclusion beyond that. Employee in the school district is one of those things. Think about people who come out to vote. So it's not necessarily no on the vote or yes on the vote, but are you a parent? Are you employed in the school district? And so you still see that for people, still have a lot of people who are not employed in the school district. And the reason why sometimes, because sometimes people, we hear the accusation, oh my God, the reason why it's only the people in the school work for the school district that comes out, it's actually to the opposite. Sometimes we're just trying to tell people that you work for the organization. Minimally, you should be going to vote, but it's not as successful as we move forward. The retired population, again, very comparable, and that could be, it's interesting because here in Clifton Park Half Moon, we have a pretty sizable retired population, and so that's, and we thought that it's interesting when we look at this piece of it to say how many people, retired population, actually complete the survey versus not complete the survey. Can we draw any conclusions from that? And because of the age demographics that we saw the uptick in, but it's kind of hard to really dig into that any more other than the numbers are somewhat comparable from past years. This is the vote by respondents with children, with no children, and kind of give you some sense of where people are. This is always an interesting one, homeschool, and, vote no, and, it's okay. It kind of, I guess, intuitively makes some sense, but, not necessarily agree, but I think intuitively I understand the big flip, because you see it's a complete flip of everything else, so everyone else are groups of people within the population piece, and so that's always an interesting one that we see, to see how that works. And ironically, this is one, too, that we always watch the private parochial, because sometimes, you hear the horror stories of people who reason why they leave and some of the issues, but yet, for the most part, at least the people who fill out survey have been supportive of the school, because I think of the large impact the school has on the community, and not necessarily even what their child may be directly getting from the school. Just give a breakdown by grade levels in terms of very comparable, because we have pretty large yes margin, so it kind of makes sense, but it's kind of give you some sense of if there's something to tell that, again, as people, discretionary funds get tighter, people think twice about the things that they do. By age, I'm not going to go through that too much, but this, again, the point of us doing a survey, it just gives us a lot of different information for us to take into consideration as we think about different things, as we think about how we communicate, what venues and all those type of things as we move forward, and if there are any trends that's worthwhile watching as we move forward, because the best, sometimes a great indicator of the past is to kind of look at what has transpired and how things are trending out as we move forward. Any thoughts, questions from board members about that?
Just appreciate you taking the time, putting that all together just again. And
Yes, it's pretty neat, because I think we go back 20 plus years with different data points, and it's always good when we hear people say, oh, I remember when, well, we can go back and verify when, and trying to see the numbers and those type of things. So it's a good process, and a good thing that I'm pleased that the board has supported that, and we do it, and because it gives us information, insightful information, if nothing else.
Good evening. Before I actually get started, I just want to thank Mary for your participation on policy review, and you will be missed. So thank you again for everything. Tonight we have April and May policies that are going for first reading, so it looks like a lot there, but it's actually 2 months. April's consisted primarily of the code of conduct, and that was one of the biggest changes. And what we did was we took many of the policies related to suspension and incorporated it into the code of conduct to allow for greater accessibility, easier for people to refer to and use it instead of going through several different policies. So that's one of the biggest changes you'll see there regarding that.
So back before we go into that, just for technicality purposes, the code of conduct is listed separately because if there's any comments that the board members or quite frankly the public even have on the code of conduct that we could entertain. Because by law, that's supposed to be a separate policy piece.
Then you have the May policies, which primarily, most of them are special education policies for first reading, in addition to head lice pediculosis.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move over to consent items. First one is the treasurer's report. Motion from Mr. Casey, second from Mr. Gilbert. Any comments, questions? Okay, all in favor? Second is minutes. Can I have a motion to combine them?
I was absent.
Let's separate them. So motion on the minutes of May 9th. Mr. Gilbert first, Mrs. Rajat second. Any comments, questions? All in favor? And minutes of May 23. Motion, Mr. Casey, second, Mrs. Stevenson. Comments, questions? All in favor? Okay. One abstain. Okay, thank you. Business items. 14 items on 14 bids. Motion to combine them into one vote. Mrs. Stevenson, second, Mr. Casey. Any comments, questions on the 14 bids? Go ahead.
Or not specifically on the bids, right? Is that all just one action? I know it's listed as.
Yeah, we'll treat it as one action item.
Okay. So I just wanted to make a comment, especially, as I saw a lot of this stuff being listed, one of the things that came across my mind as a student was especially, as I know some of the stuff being purchased, was the use of air conditioning inside schools. I know we haven't been hit so hard maybe this year, but in years prior, especially as we get to that, that June season, it can get excruciatingly hot outside, and it can definitely go into the classroom. And specifically, I'll mention a classroom at Arenda, there's 88 degrees, and that's very tricky to have students be learning in an environment like that. In addition, I can remember taking the Regents last year, and and having the the paper be kind of damp from the humidity levels. And I just wanted to encourage, with all due respect to the budget process, maybe potentially having that air conditioning installed. I think it would be great for testing equity, as well as to really improve the learning environment to our students.
Good point. Any other comments or questions on the bids? Okay, all in favor? Okay. Let's go over to a contracts extension for boiler and DHW maintenance and repair. Any motion on this one? Mr. Casey, second, Mrs. Stevenson. Comments, questions? All in favor? Number 3 is a budget reappropriation for tax certiorari statements. What's that?
Settlements.
Settlements. Okay. Motion to bring this one up. Mr. Gilbert, Mrs. Rajat, any comments, questions? Go ahead.
Is this a series of settlements or a particular?
So we have tons of tax certiorari settlements, and so what we do after we resolve, many of them are smaller, and when we resolve, it's how we transfer the funds to pay those out of the tax certiorari account. So we're not impacting the general fund directly. So to your question, yes, and a lot of them are small, and typically the larger ones we'll discuss with the board. If we have those that's going to be $100,000 impact or more.
Okay.
You would have
This is
heard about
likely to
those.
be a group.
Yeah, so I mean, it's the annual, around March, they come in every day from different people, most of the businesses, of course. So again, you see that the dollar amount isn't that significant.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All in favor? Or do you have a comment? No. Okay, all in favor? Okay, let's see if we can combine 4, 5, and 6. Motion to do that. Mr. Gilbert, second, Mrs. Rajat. And so these are 3 contracts. One's with College Board, another is with Harris WinCap, and a third with Hobson's Naviance. Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor? Number 7, contracted services for special education access therapy. Motion, Mrs. Rajat. Second, Mr. Casey. Comments, questions? All in favor? Next up is disposal of obsolete furniture, equipment, and textbooks, something we do around this time of the year. A motion to bring this one up. Mrs. Stevenson, second, Mr. Casey. Comments, questions?
You could probably get something for the slide projector.
Slide projector,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Okay.
Probably vintage now.
Yeah. All in favor? And number 9, donation of a piano and refrigerator. Motion to bring this one forward. Mrs. Blaber,
With
second.
gratitude.
Mr. Casey, comments, questions? Supported with gratitude. Anything else? All in favor? Number 10, equity transfer for the bus purchase. This is something we do to, I think, describing sort of balance fund between the previous year. Motion to bring this one to the floor. Mrs. Rajat, second, Mrs. Stevenson. Comments, questions? All in favor? And then number 11, to establish a scholarship fund at Scano called the Millie Caroli Scholarship. Motion, Mrs. Blaber. Second, Mr. Casey. Comments, questions?
Just saying, Mrs. Carolee is retiring this year, and she's been at Scano for a really long time, and I just think this is such a nice tribute to her service at Shen and at Scano, and I think this is it's a really nice idea, and I'm sure she'll be really touched and happy to have students benefit going forward.
Good. Thank you for your comments. Anything else? All in favor? And number 12, intermunicipal agreement with Questar 3. Motion to bring this one, Mrs. Stevenson. Second, Mr. DeLallo. Comments, questions? All in favor? And number 13, scholarship and local grant donations. Motion to bring this one to the floor. Mrs. Rajat. Second, Mr. Casey. Comments, questions?
With gratitude.
With gratitude. All in favor? And let's go to a services agreement with Omni. Motion to bring this one. Second, Mrs. Stevenson. Any seconds? Mr. Casey. Comments, questions? All in favor? And number 15, the new table of 2017-18 use of facilities fees. Motion to bring this one. Mr. Gilbert. Second, Mrs. Rajat. Comments, questions? All in favor? Okay. Let's jump over now to Mrs. Myled and acceptance of special education placements.
I have recommendations for this school year, 16-17 and 17-18. Yes.
We have a motion from Mr. Gilbert. Second, Mr. Casey. Comments, questions? All in favor? And Mrs. Bush again, this time for staffing recommendations for transportation. Motion to bring this one.
The transportation, that's changes, and the staff and recommendations. Just want to highlight, we already talked about Mr. Augustinoni. We have Gail Hancock Huddle, who will be coming on as our move teacher. That will actually be effective in September. We have a couple retirements, if you'll indulge me for just a minute. Dave Camp is retiring after 11 years as a mathematics teacher. On our classified staff, Lonnie Flynn is retiring. She is at the guidance office as one of clerical support after 18 years. Fred Maynard is automotive repairer, retiring after 16 years. And Linda O'Connor is bus driver, retiring after 21 years.
Motion to bring this one. Mr. Casey. Second, Mrs. Stevenson. Any comments, questions? Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you. And then we have action items D, instructional, adoption of the CAC membership for 2017-2018. Motion to bring this one forward. Mrs. Stevenson, second, Mr. Gilbert. Any comments, questions? Do we have names that we have for this? Yet?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, this should be.
I think there's a couple still to be completed, but
Okay.
Right, Mr. Ripchick,
Yeah, we have the new one, we're still recruiting students, but there's just younger class.
Okay.
And so once I get that, I'll inform the board.
The new outside professional, we're very excited about.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? And next then is the approval of the K through 12 counseling plan. Motion, Ms. Rajat, second. Mr. Casey, any comments or questions on this? All in favor? Okay. we're going on to after action items number 9. This is the land sale discussions, and I'm slated to speak about this. I think we owe it to the public to continue the discussion on where we are with the land discussions with the town. We had a meeting with the town earlier, I believe it was a week ago, 10 days ago. I don't have the exact date, but
Tuesday, wasn't it? Week ago.
last week, yeah. From the town, we had Mr. Barrett, Mrs. Standard, who's a town board member, John Scavo and Tom McCarthy, planning and legal respectively. From the district, we have myself, Mr. Gilbert, Mr. Casey, as well as Dr. Robinson and Mrs. Kathy Wetmore Chase. So, fairly decent equity in terms of numbers. We want to give people an idea of how things evolved in the discussion. I think it's still very early in how we're approaching this. We have time to do this. I think it allows us some opportunity to be deliberate, to learn each other's perspective. I provided what I thought was our perspective coming through the referendum process, and what sort of we felt could be intended outcomes. For me, that chart that has those 3 columns, we have to abide by this legal process that ultimately ends in a referendum that we would require a majority of vote from the members of the district. That's the final end state of this. It's not a classic negotiation. You have to sort of see this thing flow through. One of the things we talked about was value added, the cost of things, how could that be incorporated? I think Mr. Casey provided some description in terms of shared maintenance of fields behind Shattuckon as a means to provide value added. And then we sort of asked the town what they saw, and then the town presented the bid, the RFP document they showed to us in October of last year. And I think this sort of gives us an idea from clearly what their perspective is. They put forward what they considered at the end of the document a grand total value of $1.6 million. Okay, but within that, they also had a cash outlay of $1 million. And I think that helps us quite a bit from our discussions, because the last time we were around the table, I don't think we really felt comfortable presenting, that type of a set of numbers. I think it's helpful that they presented a set of numbers from their perspective. So this gives us an idea of what they're looking at. We also felt that the difference between the 1.0 and 1.6 is hard to get some tangible numbers figured out. And I think that's the point of contention. I would say point of contention, but we have these different perspectives on it. One of the other things we talked about are other potential footprints or other ways that we could get value add. It's not just about the 34 acres. I mean, I presented the fact that there's a lot of things in this town of Clifton Park that could be brought forward. And one of the things the town said, it's public land, and we put together a plan. How would you use it? And I think in good faith that's something that we clearly could do if we have a need for something. A good example, there's always been discussion on the boathouse for the crew team. And to my surprise, I learned in the discussion that the boathouse people have talked to the town. The challenge is it the right place on the river? Can you really get something out of this? Those are all discussions you have to have on public land, because when things look great, in theory, but once you start going to the details, you might find out that it really will not pan out to be a successful outcome. So, but at least we're getting into those types of discussions, and we're being open-minded and not just binding ourselves into just what goes on in the 34 acres. The town reiterates what they thought were some intangibles. They thought things like increased tax values would be somewhere in that 1.0 to 1.6. I think that's something that we would like to learn more about, see some specific numbers as we continue to discuss these things. We also acknowledged, that we still have an intention to buy land in Half Moon. I think the turning point for us would be, the next enrollment report. We saw that this last year a significant change in the trend, and that the enrollment is going up, and that's something we want to watch carefully. We also have to be aware of the idea that the longer we wait, the longer it will take or the harder it will be to find land, because more and more houses are going up in Half Moon and more land is being used. So that gives an idea of, from me to you, where we are with the land sale. My one point of issue the town brought forward is, from their perspective, and they are a different governing entity. They have a lot of leeway for the superintendent to negotiate.
For the supervisor.
Excuse me, the town supervisor to negotiate. you really have those
Yeah,
details.
I'll take it, but you know.
Yeah.
That's where you've given it.
So, one of the things we have to figure out as we proceed through this, there's going to be sort of like a narrowing of differences, or narrowing of perspectives. And at that point, it would make sense to bring forward a negotiating posture with them. Not saying we want to do it on the next meeting, but that is one of the things we want to bring forward as we discuss this, both amongst the board around the table, and also it's in the public, because we think one of the strengths we have, and the message, and it also aligns with the message we heard from the land RFP of the vote on 4 April, was people want to hear this, and they want to get a sense of where it's going, and we feel obligated that it's appropriate to give it to them. So what I'd like to now is turn the floor over to you, and what questions, thoughts, concerns. Before I do that, Todd, anything you want to add to this? Or?
The only thing I wanted to add was I felt that the meeting was a good initial meeting. There was no expectation that we would come to an agreement in the first meeting. That wasn't the intent. It was to get the parties together and make sure everybody understood who each other were associated with. Okay, what's our function? How are we going to work? We talked about, okay, what are our next steps? So I think that was important. I think that it was a good initial meeting, and my overall feeling, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, is that this meeting will lead to a more productive next meeting, because we kind of set some boundaries, if you will, ground rules. My comments.
Anything you'd like to
Yeah,
add?
I think we do have another meeting scheduled. I think
Yes.
it's the 22nd.
22nd, the day before
22nd.
graduation.
Yeah. So that was positive in terms of that. We talked about, I think the big issue for us, and I think for the public as well, is this issue of the value and the intangibles, those how do you put a value on it? It makes it a greater place to live. We don't disagree with that, but it's who makes up the number for that one? Versus some of the other things where you talk about investment of bringing in a consultant firm to help do some of the initial planning effort, maybe $100,000. That's you can put a number on that, and there's some other things you can put some numbers on. So I think this was, I described it as like a junior high dance. At the beginning there isn't much contact, but
At the end of the night, you need chaperones.
At the end of the night, you need chaperones. That's right. So that's what I'm hoping. We get to the point that we need chaperones. And I'm hoping we come back to you as a board and say that the progress of this is such that we should be negotiating. But we're not at a negotiation. We're just trying to, what data, what do we need, what do they need, and how do we try to find a middle ground? And I agree with it, Todd and Bob. I think it was, I left there optimistically that we are on the same page. There is a concern, I've just mentioned one here, that when we talked about this moving forward, we talked about the possibility of combining it with a potential capital project request or not. And if you look at, we were talking about October, November, that worked for us, not voting in December, not doing a January kind of thing. That may be optimistic, but I think it's a good target, and they thought it was optimistic too, especially when you back off from that 45 days notice and then all that other stuff that has to happen. We're really talking mid to late August. We need a number. We may not be there at that point and have a spot, but we clearly put that on the table. So we'll see where they go. It was very friendly, and I think a recognition that we both serve the same residents, the same kids. And so we're talking about the good of the order on this one.
And just one, we have a subcommittee we meet on next Monday, just so when we walk into the room, we're not first getting together again for the first time 5 minutes before. So we have next Monday, the 12th at 8:30.
Okay.
Just so we can kind of be on the same page again walking into that meeting.
I'd like to open up to questions. Anybody around the table have any specific questions? I think you have to leave. Okay. But any other questions? Okay. One thing I think I feel comfortable talking about is, they presented the 1.6 and the 1.0. My belief moving forward, and I'd like to gain some consensus on this, is that sort of presents, the framework.
It's a fluid discussion. It lends you to a more fluid discussion.
Yeah.
Gives you range.
And it keeps things either high or low off the radar screen, so to speak. So everybody feel comfortable with that type of language? Okay. Good. Any other questions or comments? All right. At this point, we have additional public comments. Is there anybody out there that would like to make some? I don't think so. Okay.
Anybody out there?
And I think we heard from policy that we have basically 2 months' worth of first readings. We'll probably bring those forward as second readings. That's pretty much our update. And final piece is adjournment. Motion adjourned. Mr. Gilbert. And before we do that, we will go to an executive session to discuss superintendent evaluation and contract after the adjournment. So motion to adjourn with that being the case. Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Delalo, second. All in favor? Okay. Short break. Thank you. Thank you.